Um, and the meeting is being recorded. Welcome all. We have a quorum. I can say that I should let you know that Ken Jones and Matt Coda are going to be late, but they will be here by roughly 10 o'clock. They should be. And with that, we'll start with a review of the agenda. You've seen the agenda. Does anyone have any amendments to it? Any changes that one wants to make before we go ahead? Okay, I'll take that as a no. Off we go. We will move. Well, Catherine, why don't you want to give a quick tutorial on Zoom? So go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that everybody's comfortable with Zoom. I'm sure most of you have used it before. One of the reasons we're moving to Zoom is that it does give us a little more flexibility. One of the things you can do is rename yourself and make sure that your organization's name is next to your name in your box, and that's always helpful for others. So if you would like to do that, there's a 3 dots next to your in your box that you can click on and rename as one of your options. I'm going to ask, we have the chat function just as we did before. I'm going to ask that we reserve the chat function for the tag members until we get to public comment period, and then it would be open to the public if they would like to use it. But I would also ask that the tag members, if you would, it's not a requirement, but if you feel comfortable, we'd prefer to have you actually on video so that we can see each other. And I would ask the public to remain off video and on mute throughout the tag meeting, again, until we get to that public comment session. So that's the basics. There is the raise hand function, which you should find under reactions. So you have a reaction button at the bottom of your screen. If you click on that up arrow caret, you will see that there's hand raising along with a lot of other options for you. But hand raising, let's see, should come up. If it doesn't, let me know. Anyway, oh, good. Ken's joining us. So any questions before we get started about the functions of Zoom? Anything that has you flummoxed? Okay, great. Then I'll hand it back for the minutes.
Well, thanks, Catherine. So yes, we want to review and approve the minutes from the last meeting. Does anyone have any thoughts about them? I'm actually going to go right to Ken because I believe, Ken, you've got some thoughts about them.
Yeah, they're very, very minimalistic. And whether it's through the minutes or some other mechanism, we need to be able to track, I'll say, progress, track the items that have been raised to make sure we don't lose them. You know, I'll go back to 2 meetings ago where we talked about reconciling the difference between measuring fuel use using tax data and using the data that comes from EIA or whatever. And I just concerned that, you know, it's never recorded, and I'm not sure there'll be progress. So the specific on this minutes, we had a lot of discussion about the analysis of liquid biofuels, and it may very well be that product's going to change. But again, there's nothing in the minutes to say that topic was raised, so that, again, we can track whether that topic is being further investigated. And there's probably a half a dozen of those. And I just am very concerned. You know, we've been doing this for 3 months, and I would like to have some kind of record of issues that we feel need to be reviewed, and then over time, how the review on those issues is going. And again, maybe it's not in the minutes. Maybe there's a progress report for each meeting or something like that. But those minutes don't reflect the work that took place during a 3-hour meeting.
Well, one of the things that when we decided to start recording, as I recall, when we started to record the meetings, we've thought that the minutes did not need to be as detailed, therefore. So I hear you. I'm all for resolving this, or improving the minutes, therefore to track the kinds of work we're doing. This really goes to well, Deirdre's been keeping the minutes for us, so this will be something we'll be putting on to Deirdre, I would say. But let me go to TJ first. Your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that comment, Ken. And I think it's just really a matter of balance. I think that with the recording, probably the initial minutes were too detailed, but then what we have now, when I opened them up, I also was like, we need maybe a little bit more where it's the topic discussed, and if there was a resolution or next steps associated with it. Because otherwise you don't really have a sense of, oh, should I go look at the recording or not to, see what happened, or, it's using it as a little bit more guidance to the recording, which is where the real thing is. So we don't need like verbatim language or he said, she said this or that, but just like topical and, maybe a little bit of like point A, point B, and then next steps.
Great. Let me see. Well, that leaves, so we have then 2 questions at the moment in front of us. Ken, do you want to propose any amendment to these minutes to reflect the point you're making? And then the second question really will go to Deirdre and her ability to draft minutes that meet the concerns that we're hearing. So Ken, first to you, and then to Deirdre.
Yeah, I guess I'll be pointed. Either we ask for these minutes to be redone to include some of the important elements as TJ mentioned, or we agree that there'll be another mechanism to reflect progress on the multiple topics that we deal with, a progress report for every meeting. And I leave it to the PUC staff to determine what they're most comfortable with, but yeah, I think we need to do one of those 2 things. And so for this set of minutes, if PUC staff would like to develop progress reports for future meetings, I'm fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong in the minutes and I approve them, but if it's going to be, we're going to use the minutes as the basis to track the specific topics, and and again, not just for the individual meeting, but these topics tend to progress through our different meetings. So to be able to track them is my ultimate need. So again, I leave it to PUC staff whether it's going to be through the minutes or through another mechanism.
Okay, well, you've reframed it slightly then, Ken. I guess my own preference would be that we do it in the minutes because everyone reviews them and then we say yay or nay to them. But it's, as a consequence, it sounds like what you're saying then is that you don't want us to approve these minutes and would like us to come back and review a more detailed set, perhaps at our next meeting. Is that what you're asking?
That's fair. Yes. For this set of minutes, I would ask that we not approve them.
Okay. I think that's reasonable. I think that makes sense. Deirdre, you're hearing this. If you have any reactions, please share them. This is something that seems to me, Catherine, you can jump in, that we can, as we put together the agenda for our next meeting, we can take care of this and come back with a fuller set of minutes that should address the concerns that Ken is raising. Deirdre, does that sound about right to you? Is that possible?
Yeah, that's fine. I want to be cautious not to sign the PUC on to, try and characterize people's. I think it is difficult when I think some of these discussions have not come to a clear resolution or next steps, in which case it's really difficult to avoid having to go into the detail of the back and forth. So that might just be a growing pain of trying to have more detail to these minutes, but not go into what they used to look like. So
Yep.
certainly I today try and capture some of the discussion in a little bit more detail. So it, I get the value of having the minutes be a level setting at the next meeting and understanding where the group was. So we can certainly do that. And then I'll work with Rick and Emily and Catherine on the off weeks to just check in with how those look. If it's, we can just do that.
We can do that. And so you and I, we can work on these minutes and of course the minutes of today's meeting. I think we'll find we can find a medium, a happy medium that describes what's going on without going too far.
And if anyone has kind of a good baseline for how that fuels discussion, how they would like that characterized from the last meeting, I'm very welcome to receive that. Just as a side. Thanks.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks.
I think that then sort of, if we table the minutes for now and those are revised, Emily, did you want to weigh in before we move on to the next topic?
This is a small intermediate topic. I just wanted to note that Ben Potsker is here from Efficiency Vermont and will be participating. And I had let folks know before the meeting. I just didn't want to get too far noting that.
Thank you very much. I did have that in my notes and we sort of gotten into the weeds already in the minutes. So appreciate you bringing that up. Welcome, Ben. And if that's agreeable to everybody, then we will move on to the updates from the PUC and turn it back to you, Deirdre.
Sure, sounds good. Okay, so first thing on there is the tag procedures. So after quite a while, those procedures are now final. Catherine sent them around with the group, with the meeting materials for this meeting. I won't spend a lot of time on discussing them. This group has seen a previous version, not much has changed. And if anyone is curious on the rationale for why some things were included and not others, the commission order accompanying the procedures is now issued in EPUC. EPUC had been down for a few days, so it was just issued yesterday. The main, for efficiency's sake, I'll just point out that the main changes were obviously incorporating that Catherine is now facilitating the group, so that has affected roles and responsibilities of the officers and, the PUC as support staff for the group. Motions no longer need to be seconded. We're going to follow the Roberts rules for small boards there. And we changed the quorum requirements to a simple majority. I think that's roughly it on procedures. Does anyone have any initial reactions to those? Have any questions? There is, that last section of the procedures outlines how changes can be made. So if the group finds that something is not working well, there's, obviously an avenue to make a change or suggest a change. Luce?
Hi, just a quick question on quorum and voting 6B. The tag will act by a majority vote of the appointed members present. Can you just clarify that? Does that mean if 6 are present and it's not a quorum, you can vote, or you still have to have, I'm assuming you still need the quorum?
That's right. You still need the quorum. You need the quorum okay. At all.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
But if the quorum is 8, that means a majority of 5 individuals could make the decisions on behalf of the tag, right?
If there are no other questions on procedures, I'll go ahead and move on to the next item, which is update on pacing and how tag fits in there. I think this will sort of be addressed a few agenda items later when we talk about breakout groups. And kind of a suggestion that a breakout group is assigned to this pacing topic. But essentially the recommendation here is that a subset of the tag take ownership of this item the process around pacing, setting annual requirements. And ideally, those members would have attended the workshop on pacing that was held a few weeks ago. Familiarize themselves with public input. The reply comments on this topic were due the 8th, so the entire public process around this has ended. That will take probably some time, so I think even without a PUC straw proposal, that a subgroup could start working on this topic. But anyway, we can talk about subgroup, what the subgroups really will look like, or the breakout groups will look like during that agenda item. But the takeaway from this is that, yes, there's still time for the TAG to weigh in on process around pacing. I do consider this part of the one of the statutory tasks for TAG. We could talk a little bit more about process surrounding whether it would be reacting to a PUC proposal or the subgroup coming up with a proposal, and bringing either of those two things back to the full group for consideration once we talk about subgroups a little bit more. For the next piece, I'm going to skip down to the legislative action. So at the last meeting, last 1 or 2 meetings, it was brought up that there were changes proposed by the PUC to the Clean Heat Standard bill. Most of these were housekeeping type changes, but there was a significant change surrounding the appointment date of the default delivery agent. The commission suggested that be moved from June 1st of this year to 180 days after the Clean Heat Standard was implemented. Again, the rationale for this was really that there was a concern that before the scope of work and budget and existence of the program was confirmed, that we were concerned that we wouldn't get appropriate bids for the default delivery agent. So that was the amendment that was proposed. Chair McNamara and Tom Nauer testified in front of the legislature last week on this. There was amendment to the bill that rather than 180 days after implementing the Clean Heat Standard, the DDA plan and budget would be due no later than September 1st, 2025. And that would also shorten the obligated parties to react to the DDA's credit costs. That was reduced from 120 days to 90 days. So that's the current version of the bill. It was voted favorably out of committee. I believe it was on the Senate floor yesterday. And I think the third reading is today, and then it will move into the other chamber, into the House for consideration. So that is ongoing.
Excuse me, Deirdre, would you just, how is it written now? So to say that the DDA's budget and plan will be due when? I missed that point.
Oh, September 1st, 2025.
Okay,
Yeah.
right.
And the concern there is that, working backwards, so the appointment date would obviously have to be well before September 1st, 2025. And the idea is still that this timeline still allows for the Clean Heat Standard to be, up and running by 2026. So that's how it currently stands. It's S305. Brian just asked in the chat, what is the bill number? So that is the current status with that. The DDA schedule that was suspended to kind of accommodate this process is still on hold. And, we're working to resolve the first round of comments that we got on obligations, responsibilities, and number. Even with this, if this date gets changed, it is not confirmed by any means. If it gets changed, we would still need all of the public process around the DDA to be completed before the end of the summer to go into the rule. So we'll still be asking questions about the DDA as either way in the coming months. And I think that's about it on my end. Oh, Emily?
Is there sorry, I'll just note, it took me a minute to find the raise hand function, which was buried under more. I thought it was under reactions, but I inadvertently told you to speed up, so I didn't mean to do that. But can you just clarify, so is there anything in the bill establishing a deadline or a date for the RFP for the DDA? Like, is there going to be any, so the PUC would have flexibility?
That's
to
right.
words?
Right.
And then can somebody speak to the concern that the tag was discussing last time, which was around, if delaying the DDA, just the need to have some, because the DDA can establish the pricing, and I think we all understand it's going to take a while to have like a firm budget and real numbers you could take to the bank, but there's still supposed to be an economic analysis provided in the next report to the legislature. And like, does anybody have high level thoughts? I'm not trying to open up a whole discussion around this, but do you still feel like there's going to be some ability to estimate cost impacts and fuel price impacts in the absence of having the DDA on board potentially in 2024?
Dominic, you want to respond to that directly?
To answer the first half of your question, Emily, the testimony and the discussion that the legislators had when the PUC was in Senate Natural last week spent a lot of time talking about how this change may impact program start date. The conversation that was had and then the amendment that was subsequently made to the bill looks to try to fit that all so that January 1, 2026, this program can start humming. They're talking about July, they moved to September, and then they shrunk the 120 days to 90. And so if we do that math out, the DDA's budget should be just about final, and prices should be just about set by January 1 of 2026. That does not solve the potential concerns about the economic impact, but we had to balance, this discussion balanced the concerns about the granularity of an economic impact study with the need to have enough information for entities to be interested in being a DDA.
Thank you.
And you had a secondary question, which was sort of, does this affect any analysis that will be done on the costs and the cost of the over program? I don't know if anybody's in a position to answer that.
I
I mean,
I don't,
oh, sorry, go ahead, TJ.
I don't believe it affects, I believe it affects any analysis on the cost at all.
Any other questions for Deirdre before we let her off the hook here?
On this topic or all topics?
Well, all topics related to the updates from the PUC, yes.
I just wanted to ask about, so I'm shifting gears, but I wanted to ask about filling the vacancy on the tag, because I do think it's important that we, make sure that we've got that role filled. So I just wanted to check in and see where that was at.
Sure. So let me just open up the procedures quickly about vacancies. So essentially the procedures, this group is designed as up to 15 members. So does not have to, the minimum seats is not 15. So the commission, in the procedures, the commission determines whether or not to fill a vacancy. Certainly the commission is open to suggestions from this group if this group would like to make a recommendation to the commission to fill the seat, and if there is a particular skill set that this group would like to suggest a candidate fill, we would certainly be open to that. that's kind of where we stand with the vacancy.
Okay, I'll just offer my personal suggestion, which is that I do think having, you know, our previous member, Michael Wang, had great expertise, and I do think it could be valuable to have somebody with kind of more broad ranging or sort of academic life cycle analysis of biofuels expertise, just because the biofuels assumptions will be a very critical input into establishing the credit values, and there have been very different assumptions for biofuels used in different places, and I don't know that we have the ability to fully vet all the great resources and information being put forth by various members of the TAG. So I would love to have somebody who's really expert in that whole arena and can understand best practices and, you know, uses of tools like GREET and things like that. That's just my personal view.
Thanks. Brian?
Thank you. Forgive me, I need to roll back to Emily's second question about costs and the answer that we got, which it didn't affect the costs. My recollection was the problem was that the DDA costs weren't going to be available, and the cost of the program weren't going to be available. The DDA costs weren't going to be available to compliance entities in a timely manner, and that the overall program costs and costs to consumers wasn't going to be available in time for the legislature to act. That's my recollection from listening to the last meeting. So does the statement, it doesn't change the economic analysis, mean that both of those things are still the case?
Pardon me if I was unclear the first time. The iterative budget building process between the DDAs and the obligated parties under this proposed change would be able to happen before January 1 of 2026, so that, you know, program efficacy is maintained. Cost forecasts are put in a more difficult position by this change. So I think the concerns that you're remembering from the last meeting still do apply.
Okay, thanks, Dominic. I don't have a good answer to that, but thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. I wanted to go back to Emily's suggestion or point that she raised about the vacancy and just say, if there are others that have a specific, that want to weigh in on that, I think it's worth taking a few minutes to see if others have a particular point of view, but also make clear that we are not asking for a decision of this group on that point today. And to the extent that you want to bring it up and actually have a TAG recommendation to the PUC on this, we would take that up at our next meeting, perhaps, if there seems to be a strong support for that. But if there's others that have an opinion to the contrary or want to confirm Emily's point of view, love to hear it. If you're indifferent. Yeah, Brian.
I imagine Matt Cota is going to have something to say about this. So maybe we need to revisit this or give him an opportunity to weigh in when he joins.
Yeah, and as I said, we're not making any decisions. This would just be for an opportunity for people to voice how they're feeling or reacting right now. Okay. All right. Well, let me just ask one more time. Are we any other issues for the PUC that you want to raise right now? Otherwise, we will move to our session on our work and our schedule. Okay. Just before I turn it over to you, Rick, I just wanted to introduce or give TJ an opportunity to talk a little bit about a schedule and a flow chart that DPS has been working on. I learned this when I talked to him earlier this week as I was reaching out to each of the TAG members. So it seemed like a really useful tool that people have been asking for. And so I asked him if he would be willing just to show us what they're working on, and it's not ready for prime time, not ready to distribute, but would be something that maybe you would be interested in knowing is in the works. And I think you have the ability to share your screen if you'd like to, TJ.
Yeah, thanks. So even just for our own purposes, we're trying to get a visual of really what the process is to get from here to implementation of a clean heat standard. I'm just going to flash something up on the screen. It's still very draft right now, but just to give you all a sense of what we're looking at or what we're trying to develop. This is probably too small for you to actually read anything in the boxes. Hopefully you can see the screen though. And it's really just developing some kind of process of tasks that need to be done by different entities. And you can see the tag is on there, the Public Service Department with its potential study, which will be broken out further, the PUC's responsibilities, it also has the Equity Advisory Group, obligated parties, and then a DDA process, which we're going to modify this to reflect, I think, assume the process that the bill passes, rightly or wrongly. But this is, generally what we're thinking about. I just wanted to flash this up, but to say, and we hopefully will have a draft for the next TAG meeting, that before the next TAG meeting, I should say, so that you all can have a look, and hopefully this will be something helpful to help guide our work. And again, when we do present a draft, we'll be looking for feedback on it, on like where things line up. Are they in the right order? Are we missing tasks that need to be done? And all of that, but really just trying to help visualize for ourselves. The Excel spreadsheet that the PUC did was great. And in fact, it's, that PC line was reflective of a lot of the deadlines that were in the original schedule right now. But it's really hard to conceptualize kind of the flow of events in that spreadsheet. And so we were trying to translate it into something like this, with swim lanes and different entities responsible for different things and how they all relate. It is likely to get a little messy. Hopefully we'll consolidate. We also expect to have with it, you may have noticed some numbers in some of the boxes, and some, a Word document that has a reference with a little more detail, which each of the boxes means, so that, a little reference chart. But that's it. That's what we're working on. And hopefully, in a week or 10 days before the next TAG meeting, we will have something to really share with you all.
And I understand that the same chart has been shared or will be shared with the EAG, and they can add their detail as well, so we can see where they are overall in the process.
Yes.
Great. That's awesome. So don't want to subject you to questions at this point. We'll hold off on that until you actually have something you're ready to share with us. But with that, I think now a good time to turn to you, Rick, for just setting up this next conversation.
Great, thank you very much. I've spoken to, I hope, all of you or almost all of you about this topic, and I've gotten your input on, and this topic being our work, how we can proceed. What is it we need to do to start providing real value to the PUC and the process in general? And I've gotten, great input from you all and reactions to some thoughts. And what we'd like to talk about for the next, I guess, is it an hour or however much time we've given it, 45 minutes, I guess. Of course, as much time as we need, is a proposal that I'm putting before you for identifying issue areas that we can then create what we'll call breakout groups around for the purpose, for many purposes, and that's one of the things we want to have this discussion touch on, is exactly what or more exactly what the purposes of these breakout groups would be, to identify issues, raise concerns, educate the TAG, and possibly when the time comes, make recommendations for TAG action on the issues that those groups are addressing. Now, how many groups we might need is to be discussed. I think that we would want to prioritize their work, identify the X number of topics that we want to dig in on, and then prioritize them with the help of course, of TJ's schedule. I think that would be terrific. These groups, because we have Zoom now, it will be possible to conduct these groups for some period of time during our regularly scheduled meetings. We can have breakout groups. They will be recorded. Folks can chew on issues and then come back to the TAG with a report on what they discussed and where they stand. It is also the case that the breakout groups can conduct or can get together and again chew on the issues between meetings. I have spoken with Ed McNamara, the chair of the commission, and it is his interpretation, and I agree with it, that as the Climate Council did, we too can have inter-meeting work done by small breakout groups that are not quorums. They would consist of fewer than a quorum. They can get together, discuss issues, and come back to the TAG and report. They can't take action. No subgroup could take action anyway. No breakout group could take any action anyway. Only the TAG can take action as and I think that this will facilitate our work, make us more efficient, and make it possible for us to address issues in a more timely fashion. And if I'm not clear on this, those breakout groups would not be in the time between meetings, would not be subject to open meeting requirements. Again, this is in keeping with what the Climate Council did, and so long as they do not consist of a quorum, we're good to go. So with that in mind, I think I touched on the points I wanted to make. I'd like to open up the conversation to what these issues might be that we would want to assign breakout groups to, and identify what their charges could be. And one of them will be that they figure out what their own charge is. That often happens. And see where it is that we can make some headway while we are awaiting output from the consultants we're going to hear from in the next hour, and also from the department's potential study consultants. So does that all make sense? So with that in mind, I'd like to open up. Well, I can suggest what some of the early topics might be. Obviously, questions around biofuels, the pacing issue, credit values, and so on. But
Rick, would it help if I actually showed that portion of the agenda that lists these things?
Sure.
In front of them? I think that might be useful. All right.
Sure.
So are you seeing just that portion of the agenda that has some of those ideas that you're throwing out for consideration?
Oh, is it? Oh, this is mine. Oh, sorry. I don't have my agenda up, I'm afraid.
No, do you
No,
see?
Catherine, you're not sharing the right screen. It looks like we're seeing your Zoom launch meeting.
Okay, let's go back then.
Or yeah, you just have to share a different window, I think.
Yeah, I thought I clicked on the Word document. Let's try again. That work? No,
Yes.
it
Well,
did.
yeah.
Now you're seeing it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So,
Credit ownership, cost impacts, market scenarios, or issues related to biofuels, RNG and biomass. The question of life cycle emissions with inventory emissions. I'm not sure if that's something we need to take up right away, but again, I want to hear what the group has to say. But certainly the measure characterization, emission schedules, and credit values are all there. And how and whether particular issues should be combined in a particular breakout group, all those things are to be discussed. My thought is that in the time we have, we might be able to narrow down, where we want to start with these groups. We can take your preferences for membership. I say membership, which group you want to work on. I'd like to keep the groups to 4 or 5 people. It may be that during the interim between this meeting and the next, that we need to sit down and make assignments. To the extent we can, we want the groups to reflect a diversity of, a general diversity that is embodied in the tag, but that may be difficult and, when you're talking about 3 or 4 people, but we'll try to do that as much as possible. Forgive me for not being particularly, cogent in this description, but I hope you're able to follow me and you get the gist of what I think we ought to do. So with that, I'd like to open it up and see where we stand, where folks think we could make some headway.
and can I just suggest that maybe what we start with just any comments you have on sort of the structure that Rick has proposed, that we meet. These groups are less than quorum, obviously, preferably closer to 5 or less, that we would try to get a diversity of voices in those groups, that they could meet during a portion of our meetings each week, and that they would also have the opportunity to meet in between if they so choose to do so. That there would be, I don't know if you mentioned this, that we would love to have a point person for each of those groups, so that person would be responsible, first of all, there's some logistics we have to manage in terms of actual recording, but also just reporting back on, what, as Rick mentioned, the status of the group or anything that they would like the larger tag to take up. So setting aside sort of the specifics of what each group would do, I'm just wondering if there are any suggestions on the structure itself.
Yeah, I guess I can't find my hand right now. I in terms of identifying which ones to work on, for me, the way my head's working is the details of what those topics are. And I'll use one example. I've mentioned a couple times this topic of wood, and I know there's one all related to issues related to biofuels, RNG, and biomass. But for wood, I can imagine coming up with some rather detailed questions that lead to maybe a detailed output, where the detailed output is establishing a an emission number for wood, and there may be 3. There may be 1 for pellets, 1 for chips, and 1 for cordwood. That would be then the basis for a measure characterization, and a lot of the work that goes into credit development. So it's that, and that's the way my head works. It's can a small group kind of set up topics like that lead to a particular output? Because some of these topics are so big that it's just hard. I can imagine the early meetings just, kind of spinning wheels and throwing a lot of stuff against the wall. So that's how my head works on getting to a particular outcome from one of many of these topics.
So Ken, you're raising more a question of what would be the responsibilities of these groups, before, and maybe that's something we should talk about before we get into which topics.
Yeah, because it's right. It's how to choose is to me, it's based on, okay, what do we really think the discussions are going to be like in those subtopics?
Okay, and I think that goes to the part of the agenda here where it talks about what is the charge to each group, and I guess I'd turn it back to you, Rick, because you've given some thought to what you were hoping these groups would actually do. And here we've got some bullets that go to some of your points, Ken. But Rick, why don't you describe it more broadly?
If I can, and then I'll turn, and then we want to hear from TJ. My thought has been that the subgroups would, and I guess I'm going to repeat myself here, would in fact, in certain subject areas, do exactly what you're suggesting, Ken, is identify where there are issues that will be, that they believe will be important challenges for the work that the consultants should be alerted to in some way or another, and that there may be ways to be thinking about these issues that the whole tag needs to be educated on, so that when the time comes to review the work of the consultants, we'll be better placed, better equipped to have the discussion and work through the issue. That's about as co-ate as I can be on this at this point. You're absolutely right, Ken. Issues such as wood raise particular questions. There are other ones with biofuels and so on. I just don't. I don't know that I have a more complete idea of just how those discussions would work and what they, what would come out of them. So, sorry, I can't be more helpful. I'm really looking for initiative here, I suppose. But with that, let's hear from TJ, and then let's see if we can refine it some more.
Yeah, so two things process-wise. First, the department, as part of the Clean Heat Standard process, has hired some staff. So I think one, I want to just mention some of the staff you mentioned. You saw last time around, Ben Bolaski, who's also on the Equity Advisory Group, and Matthew Bakerpool can help out in some of these work groups. And so that may not be, where I'm not I guess I'm the official tag member from the department, but the Department of Public Service can participate in several work groups support, even though it's not the official tag member. And to throw that out there. But then I guess just to follow on Rick's point, I think, one of the things that I imagine is that, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, we're going to have some, there was a lot of feedback and questions about the potential study that were provided, and there's going to be some measure characterization done in that study, that, there'll be responses to that feedback provided soon, before the next tag meeting. And then that could kind of create more opportunity for maybe what Ken's talking about is like a discrete issue, whether it's a biofuels question or a wood question, for a work group to work on and respond to. And so I think that is really useful, and having those types of discrete questions to answer will make it all worthwhile.
Can I just interject to follow up on TJ's suggestion that other folks at the DPS could help work in these breakout groups, and that actually applies to all of you. I think the procedures allow that for subgroups. You are allowed to bring in individuals in your organization that have a specific expertise that you think would be valuable to that group. So keep that in mind, I guess, as we're talking about this. Brian.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine. Yeah, TJ makes a good point. I'm trying to understand exactly how these groups are going to interact with the contractor work. I think, I mean, my understanding is like things like measure characterization and the credit values, the emissions to inventory, biofuel scoring in particular, that's all work that the contractors are doing, and both contractors are doing it, and they're doing it on a different schedule. I had the opportunity to actually hear briefings from both of them individually and also a joint meeting as well. So they're not doing exactly the same work, but they're doing similar work, but they're doing it on different schedules. And my initial, when we talked about this earlier, I thought, our groups were going to be looking at these issues more the way that Ken was describing it, or the way I understood it. It's like, here's a way forward, for example, to be able to evaluate what's the credits that a biomass or a biofuel system would earn as it replaced, A, B, or C, and kind of evolved to this place where I think, really the contractors doing that work. And I heard Rick say, to these groups are going to be identifying issues that I am summarizing as to inform the contractor work. And that's fine. But I think that's different than I had envisioned it before. And I think that's probably better, but I think it requires an understanding of, what is the schedule for deliverables from each of the contractors, and like what are the appropriate input points. And I think that some of that comes later, versus as I'm looking at this list, which I know I'm getting ahead of the conversation, the credit ownership conversation, there's always been a lot of public comment on that. That's not a contractor issue. So I think that's a topic where the TAG subgroup could start to make progress and develop some kind of a recommendation, because it's as you heard me say before, I think that's a policy decision. It's clearly been assigned to the TAG, but it's outside of what contractors have been assigned to do. But a lot of these other things, the contractors are working on that. So.
Right. Well, let me, if I can respond to a couple points here, Brian. One is, I don't see at all that the breakout groups having conversations directly with the contractors in any, however we want to think about this. The breakout groups are for informing the TAG's work, coming back to the TAG. If the TAG wants to then say to a contractor, either in response to something that the contractor has given us at one of these touch points, or in advance, here's an issue we think you should be thinking about, and here it is, then that would come from the TAG. The breakout group would say, here's something that we want the TAG to, understand and take and maybe take a position on. So I just want to clarify that point, that the point of the breakout group is to advance the work of the TAG to educate, assist, move forward on whatever issues the breakout group has been assigned. And that also reveals what I was thinking here is that there may be things, and if the group thinks I'm wrong on this, that's fine, but there may be particular issues that the tag might have some thoughts about now that we want to express to the contractors, just to make sure that the issue is being in some way or another considered before we get their product. That was what I was thinking could happen as well. But I certainly do see that the tags work with, through the breakout groups or as a whole will be in significant measure really in response to what we get from the contractors. Totally agree. As for those issues that are not what are not being addressed by the contractors, absolutely, I agree with you. We can, at any time, we can take those up and say what we want to say about them.
So Deirdre's hand
Again,
went up.
that was just my thinking on it.
Deirdre, your hand went up. I'm assuming you have some process guidance for us here.
Yeah, I think, and I think this is what Rick was getting to, but I think, process wise, the commission is trying to just, understand what of the tags task can be worked on proactively and what needs to be reactive, which is kind of what Rick was getting at. And, I have some thoughts on that in terms of, there's a lot of time constraints here. We're going to hear from Opinion Dynamics shortly about their timeline for getting things like measure characterization, draft measure characterizations to the group to react to. But there are things that I think are more ripe for tag input before, those things happen. And again, going back to the statutory list of things that tag. So for example, credit ownership, and we did tell this group that public process surrounding that is done. The next step is to get the PUC straw proposal to the group. For process wise, ideally this group would have a subgroup on credit ownership, could receive the PUC proposal on that, poke holes in it, assess it from, a tag perspective and bring it back to the group, kind of present that expertise to the group. There's other pieces that I don't think, facilitating, another one of your tasks is facilitating the program's coordination with other energy programs. There are other things that I think can be worked on by this group without having, consultant work product to react to. So I guess, I think that is where this conversation is going. I know we're trying to get solidified on process, but I think process might be case by case, depending on what the task is. Ownership, it makes sense for a PUC proposal to go to the tag first. It's more of a policy question. We've completed public process on it. Other things, as Rick and others were saying, as in maybe the question on a methodology surrounding biomass, wood, maybe that's a proactive thing that this group can provide Opinion Dynamics with some background on before getting, the measure characterization for those things. So just kind of wanted to jump in and present that option.
Thanks. I think Floyd, your hand was up next, and then I'll turn to Michelle.
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce what Rick was saying earlier with respect to the need for both. Obviously, we have a need for reacting to the consultant's work, but also a need for kind of forward-looking, proactive, providing input on their work. I think, as we saw from last week, especially with regard to the biofuels discussion, I think there's definitely a need to provide input to the consultants so that, they and we don't end up going down, a particular path that's not necessarily productive. So yeah, I would just reinforce the need for that. And I also support the breakout work groups or subgroups that Rick would suggest. One last point on the suggested topic of reconciling life cycle inventory emissions, I would just suggest a slightly higher category for that topic with respect to like greenhouse gas accounting, of which the affiliation is a subtopic, but it's not the entire topic. That's all.
I missed a part of that, Floyd. Are you saying that you suggest lumping the reconciling life cycle emissions with inventory emissions and the pacing kind of into?
No, I
one?
was just suggesting a broader category for a topic, which would be GHG accounting, and then the reconciling between inventory. LCA is one aspect of that topic, but not necessarily the entire topic. There are other sort of issues that could be classified under GHG accounting.
Okay.
Thank you. And just side note, Floyd, we can hear you great unless you turn your head to the side. In that case, we can't hear you at all. So
Lean forward. Yeah, I had this same issue talked to you the other day. So it has something to do with your positioning relative to your microphone. But
I can tell you virtually 99% of the time, most people tell me I talk too loud. So this is a rare thing for me.
You're not too loud.
so Michelle, I thought I saw your hand up, but now down. Did you want to jump in?
Sure. Thank you, Catherine. I had dropped my hand because most of the topics I was going to bring up had been covered as TJ spoke and then Floyd reiterated them. So thank you both for expressing that so well. I did want to reinforce that the topics that are listed on the agenda, at least my understanding of it, is that those are examples. And the reason we're having this discussion today is exactly to try to refine this. And I happen to be in the camp where Floyd was just getting into. I see the fact that we're looking at this as a multi-year activity of having broader categories for these subgroups and then having tasks underneath those. We can potentially shuffle people, but I think it wouldn't serve us well to narrow things too much right now. I think that as we get organized and figure out how to work together, that will serve us better. And one of the reasons that I really would like to see these subgroups become active is we've got up to 15 people on this committee. And at this point, within our 3-hour meetings, we don't have time for everyone to speak up and to understand what the expertise is for all of the people here. And I've worked with many of you, and I know there are plenty of people who are speaking, but there are plenty who have others to contribute as well. And we simply haven't had the time in these meetings. So these subgroups will give us an opportunity to be served by the expertise of everyone here to their everyone here. I'm losing my train of thought there. And the other thing, yeah, I'll leave that with that. Everything else that I was going to cover has been discussed. So thank you, Catherine, and thank you, everyone.
Well, I'm hearing a pretty solid endorsement of the idea of the breakout groups. And I think to your next question, Rick, some folks are suggesting maybe a little bit broader ways to characterize these groups. You also were hoping to prioritize a couple to get started at our next meeting, literally. So I'm wondering if it would be helpful for us to then switch just to say which of the topics that you're seeing here would you recharacterize? We've heard one suggestion from Floyd. And which of these would you suggest we actually probably can get started on before we have input from the technical consultants? So some of those that aren't dependent on their work, and we might want to launch them sooner. Or others that you think have priority just because it would be valuable to get started on giving input to the consultant early on. So any reactions around the actual work group topics themselves. You heard us, yeah, Ken.
Yeah. I knew Ken was looking for his how to raise his hand. That's what I.
That's
Keeps
under
moving
more.
on me. Yeah, well, one that I don't know if fits within the existing list, and that's the addressing, I'll say the definition of low and moderate income, and it's not just the sharp definition of what sort of household is defined as low income and moderate income, but then as we do credit characterization, sort of the recognition, I think people talk about this a lot, that when you're designing a program for low income, it has a different cost structure than when you're dealing with folks that are higher in the economic ladder. You need to provide greater incentive. So that topic, first though, I think we need a sharp definition and the data to support the definition of low income, and maybe work with OEO and folks that have to do this on a regular basis, but we're going to need that to know what households actually qualify as low income. And then say that I think leads to this, okay, then as we consider credit characterization, how are those low income and moderate income credits that have to be differentiated, how the program design is going to be different. Anyway, I think that's a topic that may not be captured in the existing list, but somebody's going to have to deal with it. I'm not sure who that somebody is right now.
Dominique, I know you're helping staff the EAG and have heard some of their conversation about what they see their scope to be. Does this fall within the scope of the EAG?
Not directly. They are also at a point where they are trying to figure out what their pacing is. Obviously, new leadership structure, a couple of subgroups. They are looking to, and please, Matt and Emily, fill in some more details here, but are looking to have a more proactive relationship with both the PUC and the TAG. There are a couple things on the EAG's plate that they're starting to dig into right now, but if it's an interest of the TAG and it is something that the TAG feels EAG might be in a good position to collaborate on, it's definitely something that we can, look to see whose scope it falls better into. And as we move forward with the schedule, who has the time at the correct point.
Let me just jump in real quickly. This is going to come up at a later point in the agenda, but I have been having regular conversations with the chair of the EAG just to, debrief on what our previous meetings have been about. So communication is occurring at this point.
The only other thing that I would add is I think EAG is really focused on accessibility of measures for low and moderate income and making sure the program caters to customers with low and moderate income appropriately, beyond what's in statute, the 16 and 16% of credits. I think when Ken was first talking about, TAG weighing in on LMI considerations, I was trying to connect that to statute, but I do think there is a point for TAG to weigh in there in terms of maybe credit values, if low and moderate income credits should be valued differently than market rate credits. So anyway, just wanted to put in that 2 cents in where that might fit into this group's work.
Okay.
Thanks, Deirdre. I think that will be an issue. Yeah.
But it sounds like, at least for the moment, we probably need to sort out, who is best positioned to answer those questions, Ken. It sounds like that's I know there is some reference to the definition for low and moderate income in the act itself, and I think TJ, you think as well. I remember I read it yesterday, so I was just reading that it's defined, but it sounds like you want to go the next step to really see. So under that definition, who does it actually affect? Who is it? How many, I'm assuming customers might it affect? Some of the more detailed data. Is that right?
Yes, but being in the old world of economic development, my read of the statute still is going to require a translation. There are multiple measures for household income. And as I say, many programs in the state have already done this. So that, certainly a starting point is to get an inventory of how different programs in the state measure that household income figure. Let's give you an example. That a household that has one person in it, I think it's HUD has a whole table of what median income for a single person household is, which is significantly different than the household income for a family. It's less than half. So as we then characterize a program or a project and say it is a low income project, we're going to have to either yes or no to say, is it going to be using a single measure for household median income, or are we going to break it down into the various household sizes? So it's things like that. The statute does not address specifically. It requires somebody like us to come up with those definitions. And again, it's a source of data. Whether you do self-reporting from the household or whether you use, again, go to the tax department. Many households provide information to the tax department on both AGI, but also in terms of household income for the basis of property tax. Again, so there's many of those pieces that will need to be resolved. If somebody else is doing that, great. But if not, then we should take a first stab at it.
Great. Thank you. And TJ, follow up?
Yeah, so those types of things to me seem like the purview of the equity advisory group. So I think we're talking about liaisons later, but if Emily and Matt, I'm not sure if Matt is here yet, but could take this question to the equity advisory group. I think they have representatives from like VHFA, that Weatherization Assistance Project, who have all actually implemented low income programs in the state and could actually gather that data. I think the technical advisory group, my 2 cents is that a ton of carbon saved is a ton of carbon saved. And to Ken's point, I do think when we get to like the measure mix that we're assuming or a program design, that we need to kind of contemplate like the low income piece, but we need that advice from the equity advisory group on what constitutes low income and perhaps how that should, where the emphasis should lie in delivering low income programs to be equitable. So I just think, so to summarize though, my main point is that I think that this group should make a formal request of the equity advisory group to see if they can actually compile the data that Ken referenced.
Great. I think actually that, at least to start that process by asking them if it's in their purview would be a place to start, so we can sort out who is planning to cover it. And as Dominic said, who has the time and capacity. I'd actually like to sort of put a pin in this conversation now. I don't know, Matt, if you wanted to weigh in, because we have a place for you to report on the EAG later. So maybe you could hold any EAG related issue till later, and we could just come back to the question of if there are other groups, specifically breakout groups you would like to see included among these topics, either near term or long term, that aren't listed, and secondarily, which ones you think need to be started first. So I just want to get a little more clarification on that before we go to the general EAG liaison question.
Well, if I may start answering that question, and Matt dropped his hand, but if you, obviously, Matt, if you had something else to say about this, please. My read on this conversation is that that the TAG leadership is going to have a busy 2 weeks setting up the agenda for the next our next meeting. But it seems to me that there is that we can, in the next couple of days, do some real thinking about just how to how to start with breakout groups and set something up for the next meeting. If we don't come out of this discussion with a general collective idea about where we need to go. Well, that was not very articulate. My point merely being is if I'm hearing from the group that there's work that we can do, we can roll up our sleeves and come back with a more concrete idea for how to for what the next steps would be. Just a thought.
I've heard from a couple of folks that credit ownership is one of those issues that does not require technical consultant input at this stage. I'm wondering if that is a group, that is a topic that this group thinks is worthy of getting off the ground, say, at the next meeting. And if there are individuals who'd be interested in participating in that. I could just clarify one of the topics that's on the list. Would anybody in this group be interested in participating in that? Emily and Matt and Luce, you all three. Raise your hands simultaneously. So I'll just go in order of I see you. Emily, Roscoe?
It might not be specifically me, but someone from Efficiency Vermont.
Okay. Matt?
I would love to be in any meeting which determines how we can properly identify credit ownership.
Great. And Luce?
Yes, I'd like to be involved too. I just, when we're talking about these groups, this is different than a subcommittee, right? So we don't have to worry about open meeting law for all breakout.
Yeah, you may miss Rick's opening on that, but yes, that's the case.
Okay.
We're not, as long as they don't have a quorum, and they certainly don't make any decisions.
Right.
The purpose is to get our thinking started and to come back and
compile information is the way I look at it. The groups would be compiling information to bring back.
Yeah.
PJ, are you volunteering or?
Both. The volunteering, Ben Belaski from our office to participate on the working group, and then but I also want to just reiterate something that I've said previously, and I want to caution the technical advisory group from making policy recommendations where the entities that are have, or a couple of the entities that have volunteered so far, Efficiency Vermont, Matt representing fuel dealers, and the department have all filed specific comments on credit ownership in the PUC proceeding. And so, when I think about credit ownership and what the TAG could do, it's the implications of credit, fleshing out the implications of different credit ownership outcomes, and how that actually impacts credit valuation and the actual emissions reductions. So keeping it technical, and that would be my recommendation and how we would want to participate in as a department in that sort of working group.
Thanks for that clarification. And I think that is exactly what each of these groups needs to do, is to say, okay, what are the questions that we would be that we need to answer, that we think that the tag needs to answer as a whole, and how can we help facilitate that, either through the, generating information, educating the tag, doing any, if there is a technical consultant work to be reviewed, to review that and provide things that they see need to be addressed in that. Dominic, you wanted to raise a.
Yes, I just want to clarify open meeting law piece specifically in relation to Luce's question, and give an example. So if this group is formally creating a subgroup and tasking it with work, absolutely they're subject to open meeting law. It is not a huge thing to comply with. We can use Zoom to record meetings. All we have to do is publish the agenda 24 hours in advance and get a notice out. And assuming people like more than 2 days to figure out their calendar, I think it's doable. The example I want to give is 2 things that the Equity Advisory Group is doing, one of which is going to be subject to OML and one of which isn't. And the distinction here is tasking with work. And I do invite my colleague Tracy to hop on if any of this needs further clarification. So the EAG created a subgroup to basically make an equity benchmark that they're going to be using to assess a lot of the things that are going on. That group was created by resolution of the full group, was assigned members, and given a piece of work that they were going to be bringing back to the full group for consideration and decision making. That is a subgroup subject to OML. The AG also designated 3 people who are going to be the first point on this credit ownership conversation. The entire group wants to be part of that conversation, but there are 3 members who are going to receive our straw proposal first. They're going to meet to talk about it. They're not going to make any decisions. They're not going to come back with any specific proposals, but they're going to be the ones leading the conversation at the next EAG meeting. That one is not subject to open meeting law because they are not being tasked with a specific piece of work. They are not making any decisions, and they have not been constituted as a group by the full group. I invite questions and any clarification from Tracy.
Yes, good so far. My apologies, I'm closing some windows here. Yes, so meeting does apply to committees, and calling it something else, it's still a committee. So like Dominic said, the good news is it's very easy for us to comply with the open meeting law. But just a reminder that meeting does not mean any communication, including in person or through email, telephone, or teleconferencing, between the members for the purpose of scheduling a meeting, organizing an agenda, or distributing materials to discuss at a meeting, provided that no other business of the public body is discussed or conducted, and such communication that results in written or recorded information shall be available for inspection and copying. So Vermont leans very heavily on transparency, so that we understand any concerns about how that may slow down your work. But like Dominic pointed out, this is a easy one for us to meet. You guys will be scheduling times that you're meeting, so that would be easy information for us to share, and we can assist with disseminating that information. So yeah, any questions? I can share that part of the statute if anybody wants to see it.
Yeah, this is problematic. As I said earlier, I've chatted with the chair. It is his interpretation of the open meeting law that as the Climate Council did, small breakout groups that are not that do not consist of a quorum of the group can get together to discuss issues and then come back to the tag as a whole to have those discussions. We're going to move forward with that interpretation. At this point, we are not, nothing's happening. We're not having any intermeeting meetings, as it were. But there is, let's just say that there's not shared understanding of this issue at the moment, right now, as a consequence of this discussion. So let's just, for now, I'm going to say, let's let it go. And we will, it's just, this is something that leadership needs to put their heads together on, and both on the substantive matter and the process matter.
Sure, we
And
can
it-
table it for now and then perhaps meet separately later, just to be more efficient.
Yep, that sounds like a good idea. And it as Rick is just mentioning, it doesn't have to be, it has to be resolved by the, if and when any of these groups would decide to meet outside of our regular meeting time, because as long as they're inside our regular meeting time, we will record it. It will be open to the public. So it will be fully subjected to the open meeting law. I note that we're heading up to the top of the hour. I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for our presentation from Opinion Dynamics. So I guess I'll turn to you, Rick, as to how you want to manage the process for this discussion. And we have one group and some volunteers. I'm assuming there are other potential groups that would like to get started. Pacing is another one that might be a good one to start, given that the workshop is completed. You had suggested that we only start with 3. I'm wondering if, just one more
Me
ask,
too.
if there's one other one that's someone thinks is really urgent and, or could proceed without the technical consultants, TJ.
I just, maybe it might be useful if there's volunteers that doesn't have to be a working group, but you know, a couple of people who are interested in seeing the draft, a draft of the flow chart, you know, before the tag meeting, to kind of get some feedback before that tag meeting. I think we're probably planning on sending it to the PUC anyway. But if there's a couple of volunteers that are interested, we don't want to make it unwieldy and have everybody sign up, but you know, before the full tag gets to see it, but I think that could be really efficient.
Well, I'd certainly be happy to do that, TJ.
Did I see Michelle, your hand go up for a sec? Yeah. Great. So
Emily, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I know, Emily Levin, that this has been something that you've been very interested in, the whole scheduling. Would you be interested in seeing this flow chart, and if you have time, providing input on it that shows the various tasks of each of the groups and how they intersect?
Yes, absolutely. I was assuming that there would be some opportunity for the chair and co-chair to coordinate with, you're talking about the TJ's flow chart?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I would be happy to review that, because I'm very focused on making sure the tag is engaged kind of at the right level and at the right time to be useful in tandem with all the work that the consultants are doing. So yeah, happy to help with that.
Okay.
Well, I think, oh, TJ, your hand's still up. Do you, so I would say that that at this point, this is an agenda issue for the next meeting. And we should put our heads together, and I'll reach out to the members of the tag and see if we can't you know, identify 2 or 3 breakout groups that we can start with, and some initial membership of them.
Okay, so in between now and the next meeting, we will try to put some more definition around the starting groups and solicit individuals that are interested in participating in them, and then try to report that back and perhaps get them started off and running in the next
Well,
meeting.
that's what I'm thinking with this. We would start at the next meeting
Okay,
if we can. Yeah.
all right. So I believe we're ready at this point to turn to the potential the measure characterization study and opinion dynamics.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes, you're
All
sounding.
right, excellent. I'm gonna share my screen, so if you'll just give me one moment to get that moving, I will get us started here. All right. Is everyone able to see our slide deck?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Well, good morning, everyone. I think almost all of you probably heard Opinion Dynamics introduce ourselves on the prior tag call, so hopefully we're not totally strange faces. But my name's Zach Ross. I am director at Opinion Dynamics, and I am our project director for this engagement. Joined by a couple of my colleagues today. I'm just going to skip forward in slides here and put some pictures up on the screen. I'll have our whole team who's going to be focused on this effort kind of listed out here, but joined today by my colleagues, Joe Plummer, who is our technical lead for this work, as well as my colleague, Kevin Ketchman, who is our lifecycle analysis expert and will be involved with this work pretty heavily moving forward. So we are very excited to chat with you all today. I'm going to go just quickly through what our agenda is and just have a little bit of background on kind of what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to kind of give you an overview of what our currently proposed scope is. We're going to give you an overview of what our proposed deliverables are. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking with you all about how we are expecting to approach the measure characterization work that we're doing. And then we'll have a little bit of time to talk about our schedule, which I think has been referenced a couple of times already. We are not going to be getting deep into technical weeds today. Welcome to the comments made before. Welcome thoughts from the tag on that today, any point in the future, et cetera. But we are not going to be talking about kind of details of how we're going to be doing analysis today, but expect to kind of explore that with you all, in the future. From my perspective, unless Catherine, you have a different way you'd like to do this, I think we're happy to take questions as we go. But if you could monitor for me just to watch for hands, I can't see Zoom super well here, and so just want to make sure I don't miss anybody.
I will do that.
Great, thank you so much. Any questions about what we're going over today before we dive in? Okay, fantastic. Just very quick background on Opinion Dynamics. We've been around for about 30 years. We are a full service energy research and evaluation firm. We do a lot of work in the energy efficiency space, doing energy efficiency program evaluation. We have a large decarbonization practice. We are currently the independent evaluator for the California Build and Tech decarbonization market transformation efforts. And we also have practice areas in demand flexibility and transportation electrification. So we have a lot of staff with very useful insights to bring to bear on what you all are working on today, and are super excited to be working on what seems like one of the first real deep dive efforts into a clean heat standard in the United States. Okay, talking about our scope of work. So just to give an overview of kind of what we understand and have worked with the PUC on our scope being, the majority of our work is going to be the development of measure characterizations to support the development and implementation of the CHS. And our scope is primarily developed to build out a technical reference manual to support the CHS. I don't know how familiar everyone on the phone is with the concept of a TRM. I'm not going to go in great depth on that, but TRMs are a concept that has been used in energy efficiency program implementation for a very long time. Basically a sort of compendium or a manual providing measure characterizations to ease the implementation, planning, and evaluation verification of energy efficiency programs. So we see kind of what we're doing here as parallel to that, but obviously somewhat different given that the CHS is different than an energy efficiency program. Today, we're going to walk you through our anticipated approach to that scope and kind of what our deliverables are. Very much welcome people's feedbacks as we go. Some of what our scope is still a work in progress based on some of the conversations in the tag we have been in already, and kind of the evolving feedback as you all sort of think about how to approach your work. And I will also note that in addition to kind of the bulk of our scope, which is really just doing measure characterizations, we have reserved some time and budget for some ongoing kind of general technical support for the commission and engagement with the tag, throughout. Okay. So as our kind of initial scope for this project was set up, we proposed 5 separate deliverables. I'm going to walk you through those in a little bit more depth after the slide, but I thought I'd put them all up here first. The first one is a kind of template for our measure characterizations that make sure that everyone has a kind of common understanding of how we plan to structure what we're going to produce. The second deliverable is a set of draft measure characterizations for a subset of the measures that we are going to be looking at through this project. We are going to focus this we call this an early win. We're going to focus this on measures like weatherization that are already been well characterized in other places. So for example, we will be kind of leveraging for this deliverable probably pretty heavily the existing Vermont Efficiency Vermont TRM, as well as the Tier 3 measure characterizations. The idea here, which I'll go into in a little bit more depth in a second, is just to give you all something that you can chew on earlier rather than later, so that we have a kind of fully fledged version of at least part of what we're doing that you all can kind of see and react to. The third deliverable is a complete draft set of measure characterizations. Fourth deliverable is a second complete draft set of measure characterizations after there has been time for review, comment, updates, etc. And then our final deliverable is a final Clean Heat Standard TRM. So that's what we proposed. We are still talking through some of the details with the PUC and figuring out kind of, hey, are these things exactly right? The other thing that I would add here is per the discussion that I think we got to sit on 2 weeks ago in the TAG meeting and some suggestions from Emily as well as some others, we have been working with the potential study consultant, the PUC and PSD to talk about adding an additional deliverable here that is a common measure list. We heard, I think, loud and clear some desire from the TAG last time about making sure we're all kind of starting in the right place on this. So we've had one meeting with the potential study consultant this Monday, and we have another one scheduled next week, kind of working through the process here. I will, at the end of this presentation, also just talk a little bit more about kind of our approach to coordination and collaboration with the potential study consultant, which I know has also been a topic that's come up here. So I'm going to dive into each of these deliverables in a little bit more depth, but before I do that, I just want to pause for a moment and see if there's any questions or comments on what we've shared so far.
I think you're good.
Excellent. So first deliverable, measure template. So again, some of you may be familiar with energy efficiency TRMs. Typically, these have a kind of set measure structure, a definition of how a measure characterization will be organized and what the kind of minimum information that you need in one is. This is going to be driven partly by technical matters and usually also going to be driven by kind of what the needs are eventually for the implementation of a program. So if the CHS requires that we know parameter X or Y in implementation of doing something, we need to make sure that our measure characterizations eventually have those things in them. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, to begin this measure characterization process, we want to provide a structure for everyone to look at, react to, comment on, to make sure that we're covering all the things that we need to cover. The kind of most key pieces of what's going to go in a template like this are definitions of what the measures are that we're talking about. That could include things like eligibility requirements, what qualifies as weatherization for the purpose of receiving a clean heat credit. What are we and then what do we define kind of the baseline case as? What are we comparing a clean measure to for the purpose of understanding kind of what carbon reductions and clean heat credits we're going to get? And then, measure characterizations will also include a set of outputs. I listed just a couple of items here, right? So some final points would be, the number of CO2 equivalents measure reduces in a typical year, how long that measure lasts. These are for kind of the more traditional measures like weatherization. These things that I have on the slide are not exhaustive whatsoever. I think the potential study consultant had a nice set of categories in their presentation a couple weeks ago. Costs, secondary fuels being used for measures, load shapes for measures that have electric impacts, water savings, et cetera. And again, I think our idea with this deliverable is to make sure we put all these things in front of you and that you all are able to react to, are we covering the right things when we progress further with our measure characterizations? There are some open questions here. I will just name. I think some of them came up on the previous tag call. Does our work need to include cost information for measures? Do we need to include non-energy or health impacts for measures? So on and so forth. And so again, those are the kinds of things that we're hoping this deliverable and response to it will help us figure out. And like the next deliverable I'll talk about, we will review the existing Vermont TRM and the Tier 3 TRM measure characterizations, to make sure that we, at minimum, are kind of covering the bases of what's been done in Vermont in the past for other purposes. Okay. Moving on. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
A question from Efficiency Vermont, Ben.
Zach, just wanted to let you know the Efficiency Vermont TRM, we give the previous year's document to the Public Service Department to publish on their website. So right now, I think the 2023 version will soon be updated. So if needed, we're happy to coordinate if in fact we are actively updating measures that align with what the Clean Heat Standard is doing in 2024. We're happy to coordinate on that. And similarly, the Tier 3 tag TRM is also uploaded on the Public Service Department with kind of a year lag time. And kind of that work kicks off sometime in May as well. So, if needed, feel free to coordinate with myself to work through some of that stuff, and happy to give opportunities. And also for us, if there's any opportunities for improvement, we're happy to reflect that in our TRMs as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate it. And yeah, we'll definitely take you up on that. I think we'll have to, think about how our timelines intersect in terms of kind of when our updates are going to be wrapped up and everything like that. But I think, we certainly want to, where possible, build on the work that you all have already done. We don't want to reinvent the wheel if it doesn't need to be reinvented. So.
We have another question from Matt Coda.
Yeah, this is for Zach. I think I heard Zach say this, but I just want to underline it because I was involved. Oh,
Matt, you're breaking up.
With the characterizations of the tag for the Tier 3.
Matt, your voice was breaking up, so we can't hear you clearly. I don't know if there's a fix on your end. You can try.
Is it any better now?
A little. You have to repeat the question. I don't think anybody got it.
I'll offer my comment later when I get into a better spot.
Okay. All right, go ahead, Zach.
All right, thank you. So I think I already referenced the concept of the second deliverable, but again, idea here is kind of as an early win task and to make sure that you all are comfortable kind of with our like whole scale approach to work. Idea for the second deliverable is that we'll give you a draft set of measure characterizations for a subset of the Affordable Heat Act measures that we think are already currently well understood and well characterized that just probably need some additional add-ons to kind of give us what we need for Clean Heat Standard implementation. And this is going to come before we provide the first full draft of measure characterization. So idea here is that we're not going to make you wait for us to kind of go through all of the other measure characterization work and can take a look at some of these things early. Again, these will include things that are almost certainly will include things that are already delivered by the EUs in the Efficiency Vermont TRM and in the Tier 3 measure characterizations. And the idea here again is that you all will be able to give us some concurrent feedback that is valuable to kind of inform the rest of our measure characterization work while we continue doing that for some of the more complex measures that are going to require more depth on our part. I see a couple of hands.
Yeah, two questions, Ken and then TJ. And just just to make sure that we can get through this whole presentation, I would just ask that your questions be very clarification questions at this point and not points of discussion or debate. And then at the end,
Yeah,
we'll have.
okay, I'll try to make this one quick, and that is, I'm pretty familiar with the other TRMs, and I'm hoping that you can also provide us a range. In other words, those are point estimates, and especially for things like heat pumps, we know there's quite a range. So I'm hoping you can provide us a little bit of that as well as this specific point estimates.
Yeah, that's a great comment. And Chair McNamara actually made almost exactly that same comment to us in a kickoff meeting we had with the PUC. And it's definitely something we're thinking about here. I will just say, and we'll get into this a little more depth when Joe talks us through how we're going to do measure characterization work, but we're certainly not expecting that for very complex measures that we will be giving you one single point estimate and saying, okay, that's the result of our whole exercise here. Like at bare minimum, there will be some flexibility in our characterizations. And I think the idea of ranges is a really good one that we're kind of still thinking through how we will implement.
DJ, quick question.
Yeah, just a clarification when we're using the current TRMs, and I think you said this also, but that you'll also be reviewing those for potential updates, like if some of the information that is used be old. Okay, I see you nodding. Great. That's
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. No, we don't plan to just lift anything and then not look at it. I think, again, the idea here is just to make sure that we're not doing new work when that work has already been done. I think we'd rather spend our time and budget on things where there is going to need to be a lot of new work done. And I suspect you all would kind of prefer we do that too.
All right, thanks. And Matt, you look like you're in a place where we might be able to hear you.
Yes, Zach, just to reiterate, I think you said it, but I just want to underscore it as someone who was involved in the tag process 10 years ago with Tier 3. There are measures that would qualify for credits under Act 18 that were not fully vetted or discussed in any depth with the Tier 3 electrification. So I think you know that. I think you said that. I just want to underscore it.
Yep, absolutely. No, again, we know that there's a subset of stuff out there we can already use, and we're going to leverage that. And we also know there's a lot of things that are not fully characterized that I think where the bulk of our work is going to have to go. So appreciate that clarification.
That's it for now. So why don't you
Great.
Continue.
Moving forward. Okay, so then our third and fourth deliverables I just lumped together here will be, again, these are all proposed as of now, and we're still working through these with the PUC, but will be complete draft sets of measure characterizations that cover all of the measures we plan to characterize. So after we've given that kind of early win, you'll get a full draft of what our measure characterizations look like, round of review, comment, revision, then a second complete draft. Again, having an ongoing conversation with the PUC about exactly how, the tag review is going to work on that. But again, it's clear that you all have to have input into what we're doing. And again, the idea here is to make sure that there's an opportunity for some sustained input on our work to the degree that we can do that. I will note in these deliverables, and I'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide, these will definitely have full draft measure characterizations, may or may not have some of the kind of other front matter, et cetera, that we may want to include in the final document we're producing. So getting to that, our final deliverable will be a complete Clean Heat Standard TRM. So we'll include all the kind of final copies of the measure characterizations. Usually for these documents, it's also really helpful to have explanatory front matter, kind of descriptive information, et cetera, that, for example, we might want to have information that explains the Affordable Heat Act, that provides some guidance about how you use different measure characterizations together with one another, provides kind of cross-cutting information that can be used throughout. And so our final document will have, whatever in there we decide is necessary. I will note that some of that kind of information that I talk through is stuff that is probably best co-developed with you all and with the PUC rather than things that we're just doing. I think, again, that the measure characterizations, notwithstanding all the wonderful conversation you all have had before about all the work the tag's going to be doing on that as well, and we look forward to all that input. But we are planning on doing measure characterizations ourselves, right? But additional things that kind of describe and contextualize those measure characterizations and how they're going to be used and everything, I think a lot of you will have better input on than we will, and we're going to want to leverage you in this final document. All right, that's a high-level overview of what our scope looks like. In a moment, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Joe to switch gears a little bit here and just talk through how we are thinking about measure characterizations. But any questions about our scope before we do that?
Casey.
Thanks. Let me know if there's any audio issues. I guess one is just comparing to what the tier 3 tag output is. There's kind of two additional things that maybe you're thinking of but aren't called out. One is there's a spreadsheet of the characterizations. So if you just have a Word or PDF document, you're then any practitioner is going to be having to copy all the numbers into some sort of digital format in order to implement it. So just, I guess, checking if you're thinking about that. And then the other thing, which again may be outside of the scope, and maybe this is more of a question for the DPS, is that kind of like standardized savings template. So the tier 3 utilities are filing a like standard template that has we think we're going to be doing this number of heat pumps this year, and that sort of thing. So I could certainly see that last one not being in your scope, and so that might be more of a question for the DPS what they're thinking there. But yeah, those are the questions I had for the first part of your slides here.
Great questions. So on the first item, absolutely something we're thinking about, the kind of format of the deliverable. Can we provide like a spreadsheet or whatever? I think some of that is going to be dependent on what our measure characterization template looks like, and some of the things that we're hearing from everyone, ranges, etc. Joe's going to talk about the format of measure characterizations in a second, and are these algorithms or are these just numbers at the end of the day, right? But hear you loud and clear, and one thing that I don't know, it's probably on one of Joe's slides and I'm going to steal his thunder, but in TRM development, right, the goal of a TRM, again, in energy efficiency world, has historically been to make the planning, implementation, evaluation, verification of programs easier for everyone, right? And we want to make sure that whatever we deliver is something that the obligated parties or the DDA or whoever, right, can use without a lot of pain. And so, yeah, exactly what format that will take, I can't speak to yet because we're still kind of working through the details, but that is, front and center in our minds. On the second point, I think you're right that that's not in our scope, but I will defer to anyone else who wants to comment. Great. Joe, can I turn it over to you to talk about measure characterizations?
Absolutely. Can you guys hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yep.
Great. Morning, everyone. Zach, do you want to advance? Great. So the Affordable Heat Act, as you all probably know, provides a list of 12 measure areas that will need to be characterized. And when we were doing the proposal for this work, we thought about this, and we kind of did an initial breakdown of the number of actual discrete measures that would come out of that list. So some of these areas will have, probably the majority will have more multiple distinct measures. However, some may be simple enough where they could be condensed down to a single measure. From that initial review, we estimated roughly 30 individual measures we would be characterizing. And it's worth pointing out too that a measure itself could have multiple forms. For example, with the weatherization measure, we will develop the heat loss savings on a fuel agnostic basis. However, there could be multiple outputs for that measure depending on what kind of heating system is present in the home. If you want to flip to the next slide. And these are the 12 measure areas that are in the legislation. Sorry, I'm gonna flip to my notes here.
Joe, while you're checking your
Yeah.
notes, I guess just two things that I wanted to sort of point out when we're looking at this measure list. So again, I think measure areas 1 through 6, with some exceptions in measure area 2 and in some other places, but broadly are those kinds of measure areas where we think, you know, things are better understood currently right now in terms of how to characterize them. Measure areas 7, 8, 9, 10 are those that likely probably include characterization of the impacts of alternative fuels, clean fuels, right? And so those are gonna require LCA that's kind of fuel focused LCA that we're going to need to be doing as part of our measure characterization work. The other thing I will just note, this again is something that I think came up in the potential study consultants presentation, and I'll just be very transparent about it. I think we're having an open conversation with PUC and others right now about measure areas 8 and 12. Those measure areas are likely to be implemented as measures that are very custom, very different from one another. One line extension might be very different than another line extension. One, renewable energy district heating project might be extremely different than another. And I think there's an open conversation happening about whether we should be characterizing these in our work at all, or if they should be left as custom, because we need to figure out, right, the extent to which work that we are doing is going to be productive here in the advance of actually knowing the particular details of a project that's going to be implemented. So again, welcome any comments, thoughts on that, but that's just an open conversation we are continuing to have with the PUC about what's going on. I will point out this is a place, and I'm going to again steal my own thunder for the end of this presentation, but this is a place where I think our work is a little bit different than the potential study consultants' work, because, in doing a potential study, you obviously have to consider all the possibilities kind of to figure out what the universe of potential is, but to kind of build prescriptive measure characterizations that everybody can use, I think, some focus on the things that we are able to kind of characterize and make useful for folks in a TRM is kind of the paramount thing we're looking at. So sorry, Joe, if anything else you want to add here.
No problem. Yeah, so like Zach said, 8 through 12 are maybe not so much 11, but definitely those others are ones we're going to have to put some thought into, whether it makes sense to implement in a TRM type format, or whether we could implement in kind of a partial form, if you will, documenting maybe procedures, definitions, data sources that should be used, to provide some standardization around these measures, but we will certainly be thinking more about that in the coming months and would welcome all your inputs on that. I think you can probably go to the next slide. So in terms of the approach to measure characterizations, most TRMs, and this goes back to their purpose as to making it easier to implement programs, they present energy savings in a deemed savings format. In this type of approach, there's per unit impacts that are predetermined in some way, subject to some form of verification that the measures were implemented, of course. Review of invoices, post project inspections where someone actually goes on site and verifies that the equipment that was incentivized was actually installed. We anticipate that most of the CHS TRM will lend itself to a deemed savings approach, maybe not measures 8 through 12, measure areas 8 through 12. So we are going to borrow a lot from the work that has been done on TRMs for energy efficiency, but of course it will be different since the primary output we're looking for here is equivalent CO2 reductions. Our goal is to ensure that the TRM is accurate as possible, but it's also a balancing act, of course, because we want to minimize the burden on the end user. as much as possible. So this will drive the end form of what the characterizations look like. But even if a given measure, say heat pump dryer, is condensed to kind of a unit energy savings, we will certainly provide all the documentation and in the characterization that went into driving that number or that savings range for the measure. The goal is to be transparent as possible so that down the road when changes probably will have to be made to many of these measures, folks will understand the assumptions and the data sources that were used to produce them. So within the deemed savings approach, there's a range of methods that are used. Some deemed savings produce a fully deemed value, and we'll have to think about which of these measures we'll be developing, if any, can fit in this category. But for example, we might choose to characterize the heat pump clothes dryer in a fully deemed manner and suggest that each unit saves a given amount of life cycle CO2 with no need for any other inputs. So we know that there's actually a lot of inputs that can affect the energy or the CO2 savings that heat pump dryer will actually save. Inputs could range from where is the unit installed? Is it installed in a conditioned space or a non-conditioned space? What is the efficiency of that heat pump dryer unit? What is the capacity? However, the more information that needs to be gathered on a site-by-site basis, the more costly the implementation. And so that cost may outweigh the benefit of having more accurate savings. So probably for this type of measure, that's a small saver on an individual basis, we probably would be looking to come up with some kind of savings value or savings range that on an average basis is hopefully accurate, but may not reflect the specific savings that are realized in a given site. Other measures that are more complex we might go with a partially deemed approach. For example, with the weatherization measure, we might choose to develop a fixed calculation that estimates life cycle CO2 reductions depending on the size of the area insulated and the existing heating system being insulated. So that would be more of an algorithmic form, but it's still fairly simple. We're condensing the inputs down to two primary ones, the area insulated and the existing heating system. You can certainly go well beyond that in driving a weatherization algorithm, but again, this would be somewhere where we would probably, for ease of implementation, probably take a more of a partially deemed approach. So those are kind of some of the considerations I guess we'll be looking at when we do these characterizations, and I'll just pause there and see if anyone has any questions or comments.
Not seeing any hands at the moment, so perhaps when we get to the fuller discussion.
Great. Well, thank you, Joe. Appreciate it. And I'll just, like I said, I'll add on to what Joe's already covered and just say, again, these things that Joe just walked through are more about kind of what the end form of the results we're going to produce is like. You know, we're going to get moving on the kind of technical intermediate details here, anyway. But I think some questions, I think we are looking for the tag and the PUC and everyone to sort of just think about broadly, right, is what do we want the kind of characterizations to be like for the end users when we actually have these programs, start at some point in the future. Awesome. Okay, so that's an overview of our scope and sort of measure characterizations. I am now going to just spend a couple of minutes talking to you about our proposed schedule and then just a couple of minor little wrap-up items, and then we can have as much open discussion as Catherine has time left on the schedule for us to have. So draft schedule, we are continuing to work on and revise this with the PUC. We had our kickoff with the commission a couple of weeks ago. We're having our kickoff with you all today. As we've talked about, we are working with the potential study consultant and others to work on this measure list deliverable, figure out what form that's going to take. I think there is broad agreement that something like this makes sense, but we got to work out the details of exactly what form it's going to take, et cetera. That would be, if we add that, which I think we probably will, that will be very early on compared to all the rest of our work, because I think everything else will flow out of that and making sure we have a common understanding of what measures are being covered. As of now, we are expecting to then provide our measure structure early deliverable that I went through at the beginning of May, give you all plenty of time for feedback and revisions to that, provide our early win measure characterization deliverable toward the end of June. Again, you all have plenty of time to comment and review that, leading up to a full initial set of measure characterizations. That is currently on the schedule for early August. You will see that half of these dates are italicized. We proposed an initial schedule for this project in our proposal to the PUC. I think that scope also may have been shared with folks. We had to slide back our initial set of deliverables here because the piece of work started later than we had anticipated. Right now, we are going to try to hit all of these italicized dates, which were on our initial schedule, because I know there is time sensitivity around this work. That has compressed our timeline somewhat. We think it is doable right now, but I'm just leaving those dates italicized as we continue to work through some of the upfront pieces of this project with the PUC to make sure that we are all clear on how we're going to progress. And then after that initial set of deliverables is produced at the end of August, then there's a process of revision, comment, et cetera, toward the delivery of a final Clean Heat Standard TRM at the end of the year. We don't have the potential study consultant schedule up on the screen here. I think I can do a couple little pieces from memory, but for those of you who were at that presentation a couple weeks ago and remember, I think you will see that this timeline looks pretty different than theirs. I think their measure characterization work wraps up by roughly the end of April as things currently stand, and their whole study, I think, is expected in August. And so I just want to point out, again, we're having continued collaboration and discussion with them. There are going to be places, as our schedules currently stand, where there are just going to be things happening between our two pieces of work that are just not on timelines that allow us to be using exactly the same inputs or exactly the same information. I just want to make sure everyone knows and is aware of that. We've had discussion with them, and I think, and a number of other folks on this call, and I think we feel that is actually makes sense to some extent because again, the purpose of the work that we are doing and the purpose of the potential study work are different from one another. But again, wherever we can, we will be coordinating with them, making sure that we are having transparent communication and that we're not approaching things in entirely different manners from one another. To that end, we again are working with them right now, but we're going to put together a coordination statement that kind of outlines for you all and for everyone kind of where we see our scopes of work overlapping and how we're going to be coordinating the pieces that do, so that hopefully there is some clarity on how we will be interacting with respect to those areas of our work. So I think that is about what I have for you all. But very happy to take any comments, questions, further discussion. And again, I think the PUC, Deirdre, Tracy, I don't want to speak for both of you, but I think they will be happy to take any additional comments about kind of how we're approaching this work as well.
All right, so let's open it up for any other comments or questions you might have for the consultants. Zach, I think you and Joe did a good job.
I'll take that as a vote of confidence. Thank you all very much for the time. And again, we are really excited to keep hearing all of your discussion and thoughts. So please, as you have feedback, thoughts about our scope of work, happy to hear them.
Wow. No questions, everybody. Well, I'm sure Things,
I'll
oh, there
make
we
a
go,
comment.
TJ.
Here's a question. Then we're going to also have public comment.
Right. I was gonna save this for when I talk about feedback that we've gotten, but I don't know if you're sticking around, Zach. So first of all, a excellent presentation. It was clear and concise and robust enough for us to, you know, understand what you're doing. I really appreciate that. This isn't necessarily a question, but it's just a comment on that last point, and I want to emphasize it as well of the timelines of the potential study for the department and the measure characterization that Opinion Dynamics is doing do not align. And that is going to have impacts for the work of the TAG in terms of one, reviewing some of the measure characterization that is happening for the potential study, which hopefully much of it can align, but will not all be the same. And then beyond that, in terms of if we're, you know, just thinking about timelines, if we're as a TAG using, you know, the potential study will have a program potential path, which in, you know, one potential timeline is how we is used to inform a measure mix, which then in turn is used to inform emissions reductions requirements of different obligated entities. You know, if measure characterizations are ultimately different than what form the basis of that, then that may need to be adjusted. And so this is where some of the flowchart update could be really helpful in how this will all work, but it may cause more work and iteration. And maybe just highlighting that this is going to happen. It's more work and iteration. And the timeline that of implementing and designing the clean heat standard did not contemplate the level of detail and the back and forth of this. And we just have to deal with that. There's no way around it. And so I'll get off my soapbox now, but just recognizing the difficulties that this is going to that cause, and it's nobody's fault. We're just trying to implement the Affordable Heat Act as written.
Thanks, TJ. If I can actually just respond to that for a second. Just to the first point, we will be sticking around for the rest of the call, so definitely want to hear what you all have to say. But the second thing that I don't think I explicitly mentioned that hopefully is obvious from how I talk through things, but just like with the Efficiency Vermont TRM and the Tier 3 measure characterizations, to the degree we can build on the measure characterization work that NV5 is doing, we will do that too, right? If there are things there that they do that we can just pull and leverage and allow us to spend more time going in other places, you know, we will be doing that. So again, like TJ said, I think it's true that things are not necessarily going to align exactly, but I think we hope that this is a iterative improvement process rather than two separate consultants doing two completely different sets of measure characterizations, then getting to the end and saying, oh, these look different, right? So we certainly are going to be doing everything we can to avoid that.
It looks like we don't have any other questions from the TAG, but I do want to open it up for public comment at this point on the presentation we just heard. So with that, if I'll ask the public again, if you would use your raised hand function, and you'll just have to unmute yourself in order to speak after I call on you. Anyone in the public have anything that you'd like to ask? All right. Then I think that means that we're ready to turn to you again, TJ. You had agreed just to give us some update on the NV5 presentation that we heard last time and the comments that were received and what the status of all that is.
Sure. So first off, I just want to thank everybody that has commented and provided information, whether they did it directly via email to us or through the PUC website. And we really appreciate the TAG members and the members of the public willing to engage on this. Presentation last week was really intended to be a starter, and we want the potential study project to be collaborative and iterative. So all the stakeholders, nothing was decided, at the presentation. The assumptions memo that was sent, the presentation that was provided was actually intended to elicit stakeholder feedback. And it's super critical to the success of the project that we do that and take account of that feedback. So we're currently in the process of reviewing the questions from that TAG meeting, and particularly with items that may have been overlooked in the initial presentation, or just not presented clearly or succinctly. We're planning on providing responses from NV5 in advance of the next TAG meeting. For example, one of the areas that was overlooked was inclusion of liquid biofuels from purpose-grown crops. There's some feedback on that in the meeting. We've discussed the oversight, the contractor. These are things that we actually at the department expected to be we just expect better, and I acknowledge that the department could have done better in prepping our contractor, and that the contractor could have done better a couple weeks ago. And so, again, I just want to emphasize that these comments that we got from you all and others are really taken to heart. And liquid biofuels will certainly be included in the study. Other examples, not comprehensive, but would be included in that score: renewable natural gas, biomass, wood, and then additional installed measures to that partial list that was provided in the presentation. And just emphasizing that those materials really are not final. And throughout the process, we've made it clear to NV5, and that I want to make clear to you that we're planning on bringing things to the TAG or a work group, or that it shakes out, but so that we can get feedback through the process. If we have a potential study that nobody has buy-in to, then it's going to derail the whole design and implementation of the clean heat standard. So, like I said, we're planning on providing response to the questions and feedback before the next TAG meeting. Just to give you a sense of what what those questions are. Some are questions we'll respond to directly. Others are comments that we have to take in for consideration. I'm going to give a sample of some of the themes, but if your comment isn't here, this is not an exhaustive list, but just questions like, how will the draft inventory's upstream values be used? Asking about the biofuels and measures not shown in the slides. Will all those eligible measures be included? How will the carbon intensity of biofuels and biomass be modeled? What type of data source is being used to estimate supply for each RNG category? How will low moderate income measures be modeled? Assumptions about the market for clean heat credits be made, and how will those impact results? And then other data source questions like electric grid carbon intensity. And so we might not have actually all the answers to all these questions right away, but we will have comment and share that thinking, and then that hopefully will be an iterative process especially where there aren't clear answers, to inform the study. After a couple of weeks and feedback from the TAG, again, we'll have an updated document summarizing the modeling inputs and data sources. probably by the end of April would be, see on the schedule. And we will then seek comments of the next iteration of those modeling parameters. And that, as soon as feedback is practical and useful. So that is the update. Hopefully that was helpful, and happy to take questions and or if I missed anything, folks at the department can chime in as well.
Any follow-up questions for TJ? Really appreciate that update, TJ. That's very helpful. And I think we're good to go. So that takes us to the Equity Advisory Group
Hey,
report.
Catherine, sorry, this is Emily. I was just trying to hustle back to my mouse. I just wanted to note that, this came up in the opinion dynamics presentation as well, but I think there would be a lot of value in spending time up front with the tag aligning on the measure list. I know I've made this comment before, but I totally understand that the studies are on different timeline and it's not going to be possible to align everything. But I think if the two consulting teams were at minimum, like approximately modeling the same set of measures, that does seem to me to be achievable kind of upfront and quite useful. And I think would be useful to both consulting teams. So I just wanted to flag that. I know that's still being worked out, how Opinion Dynamics might be able to bring some initial material back to the tag and then how it might feed back to both consulting teams. But I'm hopeful that by inserting a step around that will go some distance towards, making sure the consulting teams are not proceeding in wildly different directions or having any major misses. Like what I want to avoid is members of the tag, they've done all their work, whether it's the potential study work or the measure characterizations, like there's a complete TRM, and then we're like, well, what about, I don't know, switchgrass biofuel, you forgot that. Like, we're going back and adding measures at the last minute. I think that would be really not an efficient use of time. So anyway, I just wanted to flag that. I think that was kind of mentioned in both presentations, but I'm hoping that will be useful.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that structural alignment makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
And Zach is giving you the thumbs up. I guess that raises, at least in my mind, maybe in others, the question about whether or not we would expect kind of regular updates from Opinion Dynamics, just in terms of status updates, maybe not any, major findings or progress, but at least status updates at each of our meetings. Does that seem reasonable? So we know where those points of interaction are needed or can be fit into our overall schedule.
I don't know that will be needed. I think their work is going to be so fast paced that they will be coming at least to the next, I'm hopeful like the next few meetings as they're getting started. But what I would like to do is work with TJ's, flow diagram, schedule flow diagram, and with the consulting teams, and then map that against the tag schedule. And that's the step we haven't quite done yet because both teams were just getting started up. But I think it will be more productive to have just be able to plan up front. Okay, at this meeting, they're going to share a draft measure list. And we've requested as well that the consulting teams, it's clear that tag members value the opportunity to review things in advance and don't feel prepared to offer substantive input on topics that are kind of you're seeing for the first time. So ideally, the way this would work is we would say, okay, Opinion Dynamics is going to have a draft measure list and kind of scoping proposal for measures available to discuss at our April 15th meeting. I don't know if there is a meeting on April 15th. Therefore, they will circulate the draft proposal a week before that meeting. Everyone can review it. We discuss it at that meeting. So I think it's more about identifying the specific touch points for tag input and making sure those are scheduled in advance as opposed to getting progress reports at every single meetings. I think just given the pace of work, that will still end up meaning that I do think Opinion Dynamics should attend all of our meetings because we might, things, well, I don't know if that's not my call, but if that's within the budget, I think there could be some relevant discussion that comes up, but presentations I think are more going to be targeted to specific touch points for tag input, and we're in the process of scheduling those. Sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded answer.
Just looking for any other raised hands. All right, well then, Matt and Emily Roscoe agreed, since they're serving on both the EAG and the TAG, to at least for this meeting, to provide us an update on what's been happening at the EAG, and we'd also like to just perhaps formalize that process so they could become our official liaisons if they're willing and able. And I know they've been asked the same for the EAG to report back to them on our TAG activities. And it may be that entails something like we talked about earlier, which is actually, taking a specific ask back to them from us. But let me put that aside and just let Emily and Matt step up and tell us a little bit more about what's been happening at the EAG.
I'll get going, and Matt, feel free to jump in if you have anything to add or if I missed anything. I guess I'll start with the EAG was introduced to the public engagement facilitator, Curtis Reed. We just did introductions. The EAG created a small group to work on reviewing the credit ownership memo that is incoming from the PUC. We talked about how to interact with the TAG. So right now it's through facilitators, Deidre, Dominic, Rick, and Mia. And then we voted to have Matt and I as official liaisons between the TAG and the EAG. And Matt gave an update on the last TAG meeting. And then on that note, I think reiterating what was said before, the EAG is really eager to keep communications open between the TAG. And on that, we talked about creating a framework to give to the TAG as soon as possible so that the TAG knows what topics might be more relevant to the Equity Advisory Group and what the TAG might want to share with the Equity Advisory Group. So that's incoming. And then there's general continued discussion around procedures, the Equity Advisory Group timeline. Ben from the department made a rough timeline image of Equity Advisory Group duties. And this was the jumping off point for next steps, similar to the image that we viewed today from the department. And we'll be waiting on the Public Utilities Commission schedule to update that. And that's about all I had. Matt, did you have any other updates?
That was a great summary. So I'll just use this as an opportunity to say what I was going to say before when Ken spoke, which is to say, I think EAG is still finding its footing, and that's okay, because I think our real responsibility over at the EAG is at the end of, not the end of this process, but a little bit later in this process, as we have more program design implemented. But I would also say, and this is just my personal opinion, that I think that group may welcome asks or formal requests, as was suggested earlier, from the TAG on things to examine. I think that would be good, in my opinion. This is my opinion. If the TAG provided direction to the EAG on input that they sought. So I think that formal request, if you want to make a motion or just make it, I'm happy, and I'm sure Emily would too, to make it. And because the question that Ken brought up, I think absolutely should be discussed. What do we mean by the definition of low and moderate income? And how do we create a mechanism for evaluating whether the measures that are developed through the TAG and the consultants do in fact achieve equity? So these are really important questions that we really haven't got to yet, but I think with a little direction or push from the TAG, I think we can. So That's just my commentary.
Thanks for that report. And this may be testing our Robert's Rules of Order a bit to see if we can apply them in this way. But this is a situation where I would think we don't need motions. We don't need seconds of motions, that this is something where if there are several members that have already raised this request to send via Emily and Matt, or via a written just a written clarification about what you're asking for to the EAG, that would be perfectly fine. We do not need a vote on that type of thing. It doesn't rise to that level of decision-making, but I will let Deirdre and Dominique check me on that if that's not the case. So I think it's a question of a process for who would like to contribute to formulating that specific written request. And I think it would be good to have something in writing.
The context I'll add is something I shared with the EAG at our meeting on Tuesday. I see, obviously we are here, both the PUC as well as the liaisons between the two. I see 3 levels of formality in what the group can do. First is, discussion and shared understanding. We reached that point. We have channels of communication to make sure it makes it onto a next agenda. And that is, I think, the lowest formality way to do it. It does work, but it might not carry the same weight and might be subordinated to other priorities that other entities have. The second is really a resolution, something that is voted upon here in the group. We'll make sure we have the wording right, and it'll be brought to whatever group it needs to be. With that weight, it will, certainly be on an agenda. It will not be missed. On the PUC side, anything at that level of formality will certainly be a point of discussion among our core and full team, and if appropriate, will make its way in front of the commissioners. And then the highest level of formality would be something that the group adopts and files. So again, it would be, we'd get to a specific set of language that'd be voted on, and we would have someone file that in ePUC. And that's the highest level of formality. It would definitely, dominate discussion at our team level meetings and make its way in front of the commissioners as well. So for any given item or question or topic or request, I see those as the 3 levels, and the group can pick whichever one feels most appropriate for what they want to do about it.
And just for clarification, we're at this point talking about just transmitting a request or a question to the EAG itself. So that would be just to the Equity Advisory Group, and for them to consider it within whether or not it's within their scope. But it's simply a request, as I understand it. Others can correct me.
From that description and the conversation that we've had thus far, I think, levels 1 or 2, obviously I've got it in my notes, Catherine, you've got it in yours, and we can transmit it across. If we want it to be more specific or be a little more weighty, we can decide on some language and vote on it as well, if people desire.
So I'm gonna suggest, well, Ken left the screen here, but I don't know if he can still hear. I was gonna suggest that Ken brought up this issue that I think was a good one, that if he could write it down and work with Matt and or Emily to transmit that question to the EAG, and we will see if they agree to take it up.
Glad to do that. And through what channel, who looks at what I initially write?
I think I'm comfortable with you writing it and Matt and Emily kind of as the liaisons in both groups writing it, but that may not be everybody's preferred process.
Are there others that would like to be part of that? Let's ask that. If not, I think that sounds like a a good path forward, but are there others that would like to be part of crafting that specific ask?
I'm happy to take a look at it, Ken. This seems fairly straightforward. Ken raised this issue. It's about defining low and moderate income, and we're asking the EAG to take that up. That seems fairly straightforward. I don't, if people feel we need more formality than that, we can, but that sounds reasonable to me.
Sorry, can I mean, this is an issue we've dealt with on the tier 3 side. I mean, my impression is that there's statutory definitions of it. It might not be completely filled out in the clean heat standard section of the statute, but is the question whether those other definitions apply, or is it more broad that, like, should we be making up our own definition? I guess is my question about what you're going to be asking.
Well, as I say, our statute talks about, I believe it's median household income as the threshold, 80% and 80 to 120%, but median household income has multiple definitions. And it's also related to data sources, which is going to help direct the sort of credit creation model, where we make sure we're collecting the correct data to assign a credit to its correct economic tier. And right, the other participants, the VHFA participants and others may already have kind of a handle on that. And I say, no, I know OEO has their mechanism, but I'm not sure that mechanism is going to work for all of the measure implementation. So anyway, yeah, and what I'm hearing the request is I'll put into language something to tee up the question for the equity advisory group. No suggestions whatsoever in terms of a solution. Let them come up with, I mean, because maybe the solution's already there, but.
Yeah, I mean, for what I'm thinking is maybe to help reduce rework, because we've been around the horn a few times on this, on the efficiency side and the tier 3 side. It hasn't been me doing that work, so I don't have the answer off the top of my head. But and again, I guess so. I'm happy to reach out to a colleague and say, hey, what did you guys come up with? Because again, I think this has been answered a few times. Not that it then hasn't been asked a few more times, but and again, possibly not that the statute is somewhat ambiguous, but yeah, and again, and not saying that yeah, sorry, I see another hand up, so
Just Casey, let me just ask for clarification. Do you have any objection for just a question being posed to the equity advisory group for clarification, both as to whether or not they agree that whether it's settled or needs more definition? Do you have any objection to asking them the question?
No real objection, but if you want to send me what you're sending them, I can, at least come up with what we think the definition is on the tier 3 and efficiency side of things.
Sounds like you'd be good to have it shared with you as well. Great. And Matt, your hand was up.
Yeah, one thing, just full disclosure, I intend, as a member of EAG, I intend to ask this, but I just want to make sure the tag knows, and if the tag wants the answer as well, or wants to request that the EAG do this, then great. But if not, understood. But it is determining how someone meets the income criteria as outlined in Act 18. And there are many different ways. And we have lots of different programs in Vermont, from for cars to heat to weatherization, to determine whether or not you fit a category, which will be important for those credit generators and obligated entities. But how we determine that someone fits that low income or moderate income category, of which a third of our credits need to come from an obligated party standpoint. I think that's a really important question, and I think EAG is the entity to start that conversation, but I'm willing to be for someone to have a different viewpoint on that.
Well, I think we have at least an agreement that the question should be posed, and then we can have further discussion around this, and when we get an actual response. TJ?
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in addition to what Matt, you were saying, I think there's other questions, and maybe the statute is clear on this, but things like if there was a clean heat measure created in a for reducing emissions from a food bank or a community entity that is serving low-income population, does that count? It counts in efficiency, I believe, or it used to, in terms of their low-income spending, but it, that decision was made without the benefit of an actual equity advisory group that is dedicated to answering these types of questions. And so, just that was just another, I just wanted to share another example of the type of kind of thing that would be really helpful for obligated entities going forward and how the program is ultimately designed.
Great example.
So we have Ken, who has agreed to work with Matt and Emily to develop this question, and that would be reviewed by both Casey and Rick before it goes to the EAG. Emily Levin?
No, I was going to ask another sort of unrelated thing, but it is related to the EAG, but not on this track. So why don't you finish?
Just wanted to put a pin on that so that we can move from that to any other questions we might have for Matt and Emily and the coordination effort. So Emily, go ahead.
Emily mentioned, the other Emily mentioned the public engagement consultant, and that was a component of the Clean Heat Standard development process that I sort of had forgotten about until I was looking into this in more detail. So I just thought it might be helpful for somebody to say a couple more words about that, because there's like so many tracks, where the public can engage. They can come to our TAG meetings and the EAG meetings. They can participate in the PUC proceedings, but then there's also this public engagement process that I assume is sort of broader and designed to be more accessible than the PUC proceeding, but I don't know much about it. So I was just wondering if there was someone that could take like 2 minutes and just give us an overview so we're all aware that that is also happening. Or maybe this is a topic for a future meeting, like we could have somebody come and give us like a very short update on what's going on. I just think it would be good for us to be aware of.
I can give a very brief overview. Public engagement facilitator was required by Act 18. I believe it was in Section 6, so I don't have it immediately in front of me. We have contracted with the Vermont Partnership for Fairness and Diversity, which is led by Curtis Reed Jr., who has done a lot of this work around Vermont and some work in the energy space. The Act requires 6 public meetings be held. While our workshops would qualify under that, we want to make sure that we are reaching beyond the cast of usual suspects, as Curtis has often used the phrase. And it will be his responsibility to take the work we are doing here and find effective ways to go out into a broader set of public and get feedback that we can use to shape our policy decisions and inform the direction that we take this program. He'll be hosting 6 between now and November of next year. The exact schedule for that is going through our processes currently.
Is that November of 2025?
No, November of this year.
That's okay, yeah.
That was helpful, thanks. Any other questions, Luce?
Just a comment that these meetings are always held during the day. It is hard for the public to come if you have a job. So I'm hoping the other 6, some of them will be in the evening so people can be present, because it is hard to, I've heard comments, people can't attend, they have to work.
I am certain at least some will. I don't know about all of them, but the first one that's scheduled is, I believe, starts at 6 p.m. Deirdre, it looked like you might have the details.
That's all I was gonna say, is that I knew that several of them were scheduled for the evening.
Before we move on to sort of planning for our next meeting, I just want to be sure that we are asking clearly for Emily and Matt, if you are willing and able to continue in this role of liaisons between the two groups, and willing and able to make these and these types of reports at each meeting going forward. I think it's very helpful. Matt's giving me a thumbs up. Emily, Roscoe, is this good for you? Okay. And as Rick said, there's other layers. Rick is having regular meetings with Mia, the chair of the EAG. I share and have regular meetings with the other facilitator with the EAG, who's within CBI. And the PUC has staff on both of those. So I think we've got multiple layers, and I think there will be opportunities for great communication and coordination between the two groups, particularly when we start to actually see that schedule on a piece of paper. So thanks for that. Really appreciate you doing that. And I will turn it to Rick for our next sort of final topic for this group, and then we'll have some public comment time as well. And that is just what's next? What agenda topics do we imagine for the next meeting? And if solicit some from the group.
Right. Thank you very much, Catherine. And while I've got you all, thank you very much for this meeting. This has been really great, really thoughtful, and we so appreciate the time and effort that all the members give to this work. Thank you. So for the next meeting, it's, as I said earlier, I think we've got some homework to do to sort out some questions around subject matter areas for the tag as a whole and through breakout groups to begin digging into. And credit ownership, pacing, we'll put our heads together and reach out to you and develop an agenda that will, I hope, give some structure and movement to our work. So yeah, I just feel like it's at this point it's really just sitting down and sketching something out for us, and we'll go from there. TJ.
Yeah,
Do you have
sorry.
other
I feel
subject matter? Do you have reactions or other subject matter you want us to take up at the next meeting?
Yeah, just summarizing a couple from the discussion today. One is, I think, the flow chart that we're talking about towards work planning, and it seems like discussion of that draft will be relevant, and then at least some time to have discussion about the responses and the comments on the potential study feedback we received. Want to leave the opportunity for that, and that time could be as small as, here's the work groups that's going to dive in further, but I'll let you guys decide that, but just at least a couple minutes on the agenda for that. And then lastly, I am going to request that if the meetings are over 2 hours, can we schedule a break?
Great idea. Forgive me for that. Yes, great idea. We should. And thank you everyone for your patience on that. I should have done something about that. Great. Any other thoughts from folks? Brian.
Now is a good time for me to tell you that I will not be able to attend next meeting on the 4th. So don't assign me to any subcommittees in my absence.
We're gonna make you chair. That's what we're gonna do.
Maybe like sofa would be better.
Oh, there you go. For those who don't know, Brian has a new dog, and it's keeping him very busy.
No, I'll be
And
away.
Also, other unwanted information. Today is Dylan Giambattista's birthday. He's on the phone. I've just embarrassed him, I'm sure. Anything else for this?
I would just ask if we want to take up the question of the vacancy more formally. I saw that Floyd had said in the chat that he could suggest some people that have some expertise on life cycle analysis. That was an area that Emily Roscoe had, Emily Levin had said she would be interested in seeing some more expertise on the tag as a whole. I think that might be something that we have to decide whether we want to take that up and offer to the PUC a request for the whether or not we want to have the vacancy filled or not. So I hope folks will give that some thought, and we will tee that up in the agenda.
Sure. Okay, good. Good. Seeing no other hands, I'll hand it back to you, Catherine. Thank you very much.
So we want to make this last 10 minutes open to the public, or actually not quite 10 minutes, 7 minutes. Want to give the public another opportunity. If you have comments on any aspect of our discussions today, the floor is open. And I see a hand, Nick. And then we have
Thank
somebody.
you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Thank you for your service, all of you. I have just a couple of brief comments. First, I think the suggestion of adding to the tag a member who has expertise in life cycle analysis of biofuel emissions is an excellent one. I note that there are a number of members of the tag who are representatives of the biofuels industry. And I think it's important that if you appoint such an additional member, that they be independent of the biofuels industry, perhaps someone from the academic world. Floyd has offered to make some suggestions. I think, he's from the biofuels industry. I think someone who's not from the biofuels industry should also be making some suggestions, and it's important that that person be independent. If you'd like suggestions from the public, I'd be happy to ask around and see if I could come up with a recommendation. And my second comment, I agree with something that Jared Ulmer put in the chat, saying that we should not lose track of non-greenhouse gas environmental and public health impacts of some of the measures, some of which are significant. For example, residential wood heaters are responsible for 59% of fine particulate matter emissions in Vermont. Nationwide, they're responsible for only 8%, and our health department has documented that emissions from home heaters have real costs, and the EPA is not doing a good job of regulating them. And I could go into a lot of discussion about that, but I'll end it at that because I know your time is limited. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. Yeah, those comments, Nick, that's helpful.
I may just, if it's all right, Catherine, I'll just make a quick response. Thank you, Nick, for that. On both points, of course, the public is free to make suggestions, so feel free. And number two, I got Jared's comment. I made sure I had a note of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we have someone on the phone, and if you would identify yourself and your affiliation, if that's appropriate.
Certainly. This is Thomas Weiss, and I'm listed as a pro se on there on the contact list. And I've got one question and one comment. Question goes back to the PUC update report. There was a report on the 22-21 status of schedule, but I'd like to know what's the report on, or the status of the 22-20 rule schedule.
And you said you had another comment. Why don't you complete that and then we'll see if we can answer that question.
Okay, my comment has to do with the minutes. I've been secretary of a number of organizations, and what I sometimes do in some of them is, usually it's on the agenda, but it could go in the minutes, is a list of items that were discussed and haven't been concluded yet. And that would go toward the comment of one of the individuals about trying to keep track of what's been discussed, but still needs to be discussed so it doesn't get forgotten or left out. And eventually some of the things get worked on and some of the things are decided not to be important enough and they drop off the list. A suggestion. That's it, my comment.
Thank you.
Sure. I can address, so thanks for both comments. On the question, I think what I heard was an update on where we are with amending the DASH rule schedule. And essentially that is in progress. Both the department's consultant and our consultant getting schedules and getting started have influenced when we expect work product and deliverables there. So we're trying to adapt both our approach to kind of group items quite differently than they were in the draft schedule initially, where statutory tasks were kind of proposed one by one, and then looking at when we can expect deliverables from consultants and how that fits into the schedule.
Any idea when we might get a new schedule? Day, a week, a month, a year?
I would say aspirational. So we had a meeting with both consultants on Monday this week. Next couple weeks. I mean, it's a big priority. We understand that it's difficult to work on this for everyone involved without a comprehensive schedule in front of them. So it's hopefully in the next couple weeks.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, that then brings our meeting to a conclusion. So Rick, I'll let you adjourn us officially.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone, TAG members and public, and you'll be seeing our new agenda shortly. Thank you so much. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you all.
Thanks.
Take care.
You'll get the recording right, Catherine?
Yes, I have to sort of sit on this after everybody leaves, and I'll make sure and I'll forward the link to you. Nice download.
Thank you.
Right.